We join the X-Men as they're having an argument with the owner of a boat shop who yells that they can't take the craft despite having been paid for it already. The owner, though, says that the agreement was with Moira, not them, as he tells them that the money they paid is forfeit. Peter, though, insists that they take the boat as it's fair if he keeps the money as they sail off. Sean knows they shouldn't have shown up in costume, but was in a hurry as Moira wanted them to check on her island, where she left Jamie Madrox to tend to everything, but hasn't heard from him in a while as the island comes into view. They suddenly spot a bright light emitting from their destination, and it hits the boat, tearing it apart and sending them into the water. The team swim to shore, where Nightcrawler wonders why all their vehicles always seem to crash as he marvels at the way it exploded, but Banshee tells him that he's wrong and all the metal came to life. Colossus thinks of how everything used to be simpler at home, but that he wouldn't give up his friends at all when he spots the laboratory and is amazed at how big it is. Sean ponders why Moira would give that up to be the X-Men's housekeeper when he orders Peter to lead ahead and, running forward, finds himself suddenly knocked backwards. Making sure their friend is alright, they find a dome of solid air preventing them from going forward, and Kurt realizes it makes them excellent targets when the ground suddenly explodes around them, ripping a chunk free and flies upwards. Finding themselves hurled at the imposing walls of the laboratory, Banshee knows that their only hope is to combine all their powers and hope they can break through before they're smashed to dust. Striking out at the last second, the X-Men release all their abilities at once, barely breaking through and landing inside. Sean becomes suspicious, recognizing the pattern of attacks. Before he can tell the others who it is, the door before them begins glowing, growing hot and forcing the team to retreat and find cover as it explodes in a shower of dangerous debris. Standing before them is Magneto as he pronounces their deaths, of how their combined powers won't save them and how he will soon rule the world itself. Turning to the other side of the island, we find that Cyclops and Moira have arrived and are worried when they don't see the hovercraft the other team arrived in. Moira notes anger in Scott's voice as he tells her that he's never heard of her mutant research center, despite being with Charles for so long, as she explains that though it houses dangerous mutants, she hopes to cure them of their hatred for humans, and that she started it when her and Xavier were younger. Heading inside, Cyclops hopes none of them have escaped when they find an unconscious Madrox who, upon coming to, hopes that she didn't bring the X-Men, otherwise they'll be killed. He relays that he got ambushed by Eric the Red, Havoc, and Polaris, having gotten past the security somehow, and Eric went straight for the infant Magneto when he released a ray upon him that aged him back into a man again. The two talked for hours, and Magneto, humiliated that he was a child in Xavier's care, partnered with Eric. Realizing the danger of Magneto at the peak of his powers, Cyclops warns Moira to take Jamie to the ship and prepare to leave as he moves to join the other X-Men, as they have no chance against the Master of Magnetism, having not been trained to deal with him since he was turned into a child. Back with the X-Men, Wolverine leads the charge at Magneto as the villain notes his arrogance as he reveals Eric informed him all about them. With a simple gesture, Magneto flings the Canadian away with his claws, tossing him into a pile of debris as Colossus rushes forward, but Magneto isn't concerned as he comments on how Peter is the weakest of them all due to his steel body. Grabbing hold of Peter, he is thrown into his friends while Magneto relishes his newfound strength as Storm realizes that they're merely being toyed with. Rising to the challenge, Storm begins summoning a hurricane, but Magneto, using his newfound strength, creates a field that hurls her lightning bolts back at her. Peter, hearing her cries of pain and knowing that he's at a disadvantage, steels himself to re-enter the fight, knowing that without his power he's useless, and rips a girder from the wall. Hurling it at the Master of Magnetism's back, the attack is easily stopped. The Russian is then thrown bodily from the room with a gesture and deposited in the cold waters of the ocean, where even then he must remain armored lest he freeze to death. Back inside, Nightcrawler sees a wall of wreckage coming at him and teleports away, but Magneto can detect where he is by the disruption in the magnetic field. As Kurt reappears, he finds the wreckage above him, where it then buries him, as Banshee flies into the room, vowing that they're not finished so long as one of them are left. Sean, though, knows that his power is unaffected by magnetism as his sonic scream destroys the floor underneath the villain. However, Magneto hovers back up and hurls various metal items at Banshee, who mocks him, saying he's faced worse in the danger room but thinks of how he needs to distract Magneto until the others recover. Excited, the Master of Magnetism finds Sean to be the only one worth fighting of the new X-Men. Acting quickly, the villain fuses ferrous metal particles all around Banshee, encasing him and cutting off his air as he thinks of how they were stronger than the original team, yet he still won. He then is shocked by the appearance of Cyclops and barely manages to get a shield up in time to defend himself as the optic blast continues. Scott continues shooting at full blast but knows the enemy is gathering himself to counterattack and thinks of how with Eric the Red involved there must be more going on. Realizing that the professor might be in danger, Cyclops hurries and frees Nightcrawler, telling him to gather the others at the plane as he fires an optic blast to free Banshee. Storm arrives, wanting to confirm what Kurt said as Sean is baffled by what's going on. Planning to leave as soon as they find Colossus, Wolverine wants to stay and fight as Scott pulls rank. Reluctantly agreeing, Wolverine follows the others as he notes one of the escaped prisoners, Count Nefarious Animan Dragonfly. Outside, they find Colossus having pulled himself from the water and ready to fight, but Cyclops stops him. After boarding the plane, Scott explains how after learning of Eric the Red being behind Magneto's return, he realized that it was merely a distraction to get the professor by himself, but Wolverine still feels that all they did was merely run from the fight. Back at the lab, the Master of Magnetism sees that the heroes have fled and cries out in victory as behind him a door labeled Mutant X is displaying a security warning. We turn scenes to space where a man captaining a Starjammer is telling his friend Chud that they must stop the Emperor from opening a dimensional gate or else everything ends. Changing again, we find a familiar spacecraft hovering above Earth as the pilot is glad to have reached their destination and is intent on stopping her brother's plan when she is then attacked by an Imperial cruiser. Swapping one final time to Jean Grey's apartment where she is returned alive and well finally, as outside Eric and his followers are watching, while the villain tells them that even if the X-Men arrive in time, it will be too late as he still has an ace up his sleeve.